Hello again, and welcome to the August edition of the Centerville, Iowa Memories podcast. I'm Luke, and with me today is Lisa Eddy. Also joining us today is Wes Bender, an authority on the Southern Iowa Railway, and the historian for the Midwest Electric Railway at Old Threshers Reunion. We are recording on location at the trolley depot on the grounds of Midwest Old Threshers in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. This trolley system includes 2 cars that ran in Centerville. Good afternoon, Wes. Thanks for joining us. But first, Lisa, could you bring us up to speed on where we left off with our last podcast, focusing on trolleys in Centerville?
Sure. The timeline we covered previously started with the mule cars from the depots to the square back in the 1870s, I think it was. And then they were electrified in 1902. And they operated until 1925. But there was also an interurban trolley system that ran from the square to Mystic starting in 1910 and to Moravia from 1914. And passenger service stopped on both those systems in 1933. But ISU still used the line as freight service to haul coal from mines to the power plant near the square. And once the coal mines along the line closed, the cars sat unused. But in 1952, the cars came back to life during what we call the Fantrip era. That's what we are here to talk about with Wes. So Wes, could you tell us what the Fantrip era of trolley cars in Centerville was?
Yes, I can, Lisa. First of all, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about this while we have Old Threshers this year going on. So the Fantrip era basically went from 1952 until 1967. So in 1952, the car number 9 in Centerville is rare. I mean, it is one car left over from a 33 run out of York, Pennsylvania. 33 cars of the Barber Car Company were built. One exists now, and that's car 9. So in 1952, rail fans, which are guys that love the trains and the streetcars, made a pilgrimage to Centerville out of Chicago and South Bend, Indiana. These guys knew car 9 was something to behold. So they came, introduced herself, and by God, the Centerville Iowegian put it on their front page of the paper that rail fans visit Centerville. It's an important date because they started by requesting the Iowa Southern Railway, the Southern Iowa Railway, to let them see the car. Not only did that happen, they let the guys get in it and ride. They chartered it, but they had a day of it. And they took the thing out, pictures, and the other cars had pictures. And that started this movement to Centerville. It wasn't for a couple years until 1954 where they organized enough to have actually advertised meets with the streetcars. It was Halloween 1954 is the official first day of our meets that a few times a summer. And these charters happened every year from 1954 until 1966, 67, somewhere there. So the rail fans come and they let them clean up car 9. See, car 9 was used for a work car and they had tools and air compressors all on the floor of it. It was dirty. So they cleaned it, took it out, and one guy was artsy enough to put car 9 or put Southern Iowa Railway on the side of the car in chalk. Did a good job, made a pretty presentation on the dull green paint that was on car 9. They had a great day, pictures, and it was good enough they wanted to come back. And it was all sponsored by the Iowa chapter of the Railway Historical Society. And they ended up having to change the name. They made an official name. It's the Iowa Railway Historical Museum. They just changed it so that it wouldn't interfere with the Railway Historical Society, NRHS Iowa chapter. So that was in January of '55. And they took car 9 out. They put a 9 on it again with chalk, but it was just a 9. That's how you can tell pictures apart. If you see 9 on it in chalk, it's 55. If you see it artsy, it's 19, it's Halloween 54. But the 1955, they actually took a group photo. And I like to call that our first group photo, because we're still taking group photos yet today. Because the Midwest Electric Railway here at Mount Pleasant has actually morphed. The Iowa Railway Historical Museum morphed from that group.
So did they collect up more equipment and bring it to Southern Iowa to run it on the tracks there, or did they just use car 9?
Yes, they had to, well, they saw other systems were fading away. The Waterloo, Cedar Falls, and Northern Iowa route ceased operation in 1956, and then the Chicago, Roar, and Elgin ceased operation in 1957, and all these places are leaving cars abandoned. So the Iowa Historical Museum requested that they get it by going to the Iowa Southern Railway, and they were open to letting them get the cars. It was great. So the first car that they come up with, besides, well, let me review the equipment. Not only did they have car 9, they had car 400, or locomotive 400, and they had that box motor, which is like a box car with actually motorized. Car 100 and car 101, and they had that brand new. And then they had the first car that came up available was the Cedar Rapids car, or the Waterloo car that was abandoned in Cedar Rapids, or the end of the line became in February of '56, and it was car 100. It's a great big interurban, as big as 320, and it was shipped down here on the rails and put right to work. Rail fans dolled it up, and it was great fun. This was so popular that they started making flyers for these rail fan events. Back up a little bit, car 9 was this ugly green. It really was putrid. And rail fans, or the group there in Centerville, said, let's paint the thing. Paint it, what color? Well, let's paint it traction orange. That's popular. No time was any Centerville's equipment painted traction orange, except maybe that caboose, but nonetheless, they had a guy that had a shop, had a lumber yard and a hardware store in Weaver, Iowa. He got all the orange paint and they just painted it. And it come out beautiful. And then they said, let's put a bell on it, because all Iowa's interurbans have a bell, so they gotta use steam locomotive pneumatic powered bell and put that on the roof of car 9. Made it look odd, but it was good for dating pictures. So we now got car 9. So we got car 9 and we got car 100. And in 1958, these flyers that we have shows the date, and they took pictures, and by God, the 1958 Trains magazine had a complete article about the rail fans in Centerville, and I think the name of the article was "The Rail Fans Never Had It So Good," and that they went to Moravia, where there's an auto bridge that crosses the Southern Iowa Railway. It took a picture of it goes over the Milwaukee Road there, but there's a bridge across the Milwaukee Road on the line, and they photographed car 100, and it's on the front page of the magazine. And that's big stuff. That's Trains magazine, which is a national publication. And so over the years, could we get more equipment? Well, in 1962, Chicago, Roar, and Elgin had been abandoned since '57. In Wheaton, Illinois, the stuff was just going to ragged. It's still up in lawsuits and everything. They finally had a chance to get it. And they went over there and they picked the best looking wood car that they could find, which was still a mess, but they picked car 320, went over there, and the rail fans boarded it up, tied up all the doors, and got the Burlington Route Railroad to load it on a flat car and carry it to Centerville, Iowa. And I remember the fellows telling me that it was unloaded, this is in '62, they unloaded it in Centerville, and they had a heck of a time because they didn't have a good loading ramp or anything, and they ended up trying to use jacks and cribbing. They had the nose of the 320 in the earth when they're trying to get it off the car, and they had a heck of a time. But they were there clear into the evening, but they got it off. And car 320 started its time in Centerville in 1962. And a night photo, the first run they did went to night during the evening, and they had it over in Moravia, pitch black, and they had these super flash pictures of it in Trains magazine again. And the buzz was all over. People were coming from Massachusetts as far as, and then camping at that hotel in Centerville. They would have Continental and they would hold court, which means they had a lot of adult beverage there. And then they used all the equipment the Southern Iowa Railway had on some of these events, including the little bobtail caboose they had. They had a little line car, very narrow little car. They used that just for photo purposes. And the box motors, sometimes they had them out and they just got on them to stand so they could ride. It's fun stuff. They had a ball. And all these trips were advertised with flyers. Picture car 9 on it, or picture car 100 on it. And it was great fun. More equipment came available. The 320 came, and they used that it was a marvelous old Jewett Interurban, and they used that for the trips, and it was leather seating, and it was great. We still have that car here at Old Threshers today, but the car was beautiful. It is beautiful. And then the North Shore line out of Chicago to Milwaukee, that train line was closed in 1963, and immediately, hey, we can get another car. So they ended up getting another one of those high-speed Interurbans. It's car 727 from the Chicago South Shore and Milwaukee I'm sorry, that's incorrect. The Chicago North Shore Railroad, and it was in Centerville. It ran along with 320 and car 100. So over the years, they just had a good time, super, and pictures galore. And then in 1966, criminal activity occurred on the Sheraton, Iowa, or Sheraton River Bridge. The Sheraton River Bridge. That's the car. The Southern Iowa Railway crossed the Sheraton River, going to Moravia, and vandals burnt the trestle, and so it basically stopped the train traffic to Moravia totally. Nail in the coffin for the Southern Iowa Railway. They tried to run some more rail fan events, but it was just as far as the bridge and turn around and come back. And then not only was that criminal activity of vandals doing the burn to the bridge, it also, the railroad was sold. I think in 1967, 1967, car 101 was operating in Moravia because it was stranded there from the fire. But they did do some switching in Moravia that summer of '67. But all the other stuff in Centerville was pretty much dead and gone, or not gone, dead. The rail fans were very distraught. The guys at Iowa Museum was going to cease to operate, and then Mr. Gabrazzi wanted everything to do with the railroad, get it out of there. So fortunately, but unfortunately, the gentleman that ran Olmsted Falls Trolley Museum, but that guy had a heck of a little museum operation, and he bought a lot of 320 sister cars out of Chicagoland, and then he also bought the box motors. He bought the other box motor. He bought he was buying that stuff, and he almost had car 9 on the back of a hook of a wrecker to tow it away, when luckily one of the gentlemen, who happens to be over 6 foot tall and a former fireman, showed up at the scene and said, car 9 is not yours to haul away, and produced, I think he produced his fist in this operation. So, but he saved car 9. So car 9 and car 320 was segregated from car 727 and interurban car 100, and all the other stuff went to that Olmsted Falls trolley group. In Mason City, Iowa, there's a traction railroad. It was called the Iowa Terminal Railroad, meaning it switched cars from different railroads that entered Mason City, and it was successful. Here it is, late 60s, and they're still running 1925 GE locomotives under wire. They are today. Anyway, the Mason City decided they would take on getting one of those cars, so they took that interurban car 100 and took it to Mason City and immediately painted it to their colors and tore the old canvas roof off, and they were going to put a new canvas roof on. They ended up painting the top gray for the winter, and had a rail fan trip in 1967, October 67. I had friends that were on that trip. They went from Mason City all the way to Clear Lake, Iowa, and back on that trip. And that was such fun on the old car 100. And then when that was parked, the very next few weeks, it was Thanksgiving, car 100 was in the car barn in Mason City when the next door neighbor's lumberyard caught on fire. And the fire spread and burnt down a lot of Iowa Terminal's equipment. They had some stuff out in the line, but car 100 was immediately destroyed. And a lot of their equipment got destroyed at the same time. And that was a sad day. It was just that beautiful interurban gone. So that took, Mason City said, well, we need a little trolley to replace that. So they requested to get 727 and still sitting in Centerville. So they loaded up 727 and took it to Mason City and painted it up. And that sits in car barn today at the Iowa Traction Railroad in Mason City, Iowa. They gave rail fan trips on it back in the 90s, but that was the last time it was done for the public. The other equipment ended up going to Ohio, and fortunately, that fellow that had the museum in Ohio, when he got old, he passed away, and then his museum was sold, so everything went to the Four Winds. I do know that box motor car 100 and 101 and the little caboose, little bobtail caboose, and the line car, the unique little line car they had in Centerville. Recently I saw it in a museum up in Ohio. That just about takes it up until we got car 9 here.
So cars 320 and number 9 were in Centerville without a rail line to run on. And so I know that they're over here at Old Threshers. Can you tell us how that transition took place?
Well, there's members of that group in Centerville, 3 of them, in fact, knew of Old Threshers, that they had trains up here and track. And when they approached Old Threshers saying, could they get a streetcar also, at the same moment in time, they were making plans for a campground here. And they even had drawn up a track to go around the campground, but they had no idea what was going to happen. And they wanted a narrow gauge trolley because they had a narrow gauge train. And at this time, that Midwest Central Railroad was wanting to have the trolley line. So car 9 came up here, being purchased by the Iowa Central, not Old Threshers. They brought car 9 up here and set it out there in the field, and it was just sitting on a panel rail. And they actually drew up the plans for the car barn while car 9 sat in the field. That's where they were going to put the car barn. And they built the car barn around car 9 as it sat there the whole time. Later on, 320 came up here, and I have a picture of 320 on a flatbed truck coming up from downtown Mount Pleasant. It was hauled up here on the train, but it was taken off and set on cribbing, and I don't have a picture of that cribbing picture. So that brings us up to where we're at today. We started getting the car 9 and car 320. And the first year they run was 1971. And they only used a quarter mile of track because the campground wasn't complete, and the quarter mile of track was actually built by the Iowa Army National Guard, but that's another story for another time. So thank you very much.
So I can remember when I was a kid and we were over here camping that the rail line only went from the car barn, which was just a ways away from the main old Threshers ground, and it would go straight up and straight back, and I remember paying a dime and I would ride that over and over and over. And then it was a real treat when they finally completed the whole circle. Wes does an historical sketch of the trolley system here at the trolley depot every day of the old Threshers reunion. If you want to hear him speak more about that, so always talks about during his talks is the fact that this is a completely working trolley system, because they require this system to cover the expansive campground that's here, and these people need that trolley system to get to and from the old Threshers ground. So there aren't very many trolley systems left, and working ones, and this one is. So you really need to come over and experience it at old Threshers. Thank you for your time and your expertise, and I appreciate you sitting down with Luke and I to work on this podcast. Thank you so much.